Hey everybody, and thank you for joining us for another episode of News for You. My name is Julian Baudouin. I'm the Executive Director of the Hub South Dakota, and I'm here with my co-host, Tanisa Islam. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So we have, this is episode 13 for us, and if this is your first time joining News for You is a program that's dedicated to providing accurate and timely information for immigration information, particularly on policy changes as it pertains to immigration. This broadcast is powered by the South Dakota Dream Coalition. This coalition is a group of immigrant-led and immigrant-facing organizations right here in South Dakota. And we are broadcasting live every Thursday, 6 a.m. in English, 6:30 in Spanish. Today, we are broadcasting live from the Hub South Dakota Facebook page, South Dakota Voices for Peace, the South Dakota Dream Coalition, and also directly from News for You. Not only are we broadcasting from the Facebook pages, but we're also broadcasting from those YouTube pages. So we would really appreciate it if you guys go in and like, follow, and then also share this information. We can't express how much we rely on your shares to continue growing this program. So with that said, we will go ahead and jump right into our episode today. Summer is approaching us really, really quickly, and a lot of folks are thinking about traveling, particularly traveling out of the country. So we want to talk a little bit about that. And so we've seen some reports in the news where people are getting searched and held for long periods of time. And then also where folks are not being allowed back into the United States. So Tanisa, what should we know about international travel?
Yeah, like everything right now, everything is kind of uncertain. So I'll be providing information that we know and that's been, discussed by other immigration experts in the region and across the country. So this is analysis I actually had to do for myself. A really good friend of mine, they live here in Sioux Falls, but her daughter is getting married in Egypt. And I was like, wow, that would be fun to go to. Yeah. But based on what we're seeing in the news and seeing people detained for long periods of time, I had to ask myself if it was worth it. So I just want to break it down by what agents can do when you're going into the airport and coming back to the country and what to do about devices, essentially, I think are the big questions that I've been getting also.
When you say devices, you mean like cell phones, laptops, those things?
All of those things. Yep.
Awesome.
So let's start with TSA. TSA are the agents that check your ID and your boarding pass, where you go through the screening for your bags and yourself. So I'm going to talk about the do's and don'ts that they can do. So TSA can detain you briefly if they feel that you're a security risk or engaging in some sort of illegal activity. Ask to pat you down. They can ask to open your carry-on luggage and search through it. And they can ask about your citizenship and where you are traveling. But they cannot ask you personal questions without cause about your family, your job, your politics, or your religion. They cannot target you for more screening based solely on your race, ethnicity, or religion. That's discrimination. They cannot handcuff you or strip search you without probable cause, and we've talked about that as a high standard, that you have committed a crime or you're going to be committing the crime. They can't force you to remove certain religious items like a head cover, a hijab, or a yarmulke without a private room. So you can ask for a private room at any time, even if you don't have a religious thing that you want, but you just want more privacy if they're going to pat you down. And they cannot force you to be patted down by someone of the opposite gender. So again, you can ask for a private room.
So just real quick on that, I just recently did some traveling, and what I noticed was TSA is now asking folks beforehand if they want a private room. I've never been asked that before. And so I was kind of noticing that every single person coming through the TSA line has been offered a private room now.
Okay.
So that's a little bit,
That's
that was
great.
just a couple days ago.
Oh, here in Sioux Falls?
Sioux Falls and Dallas.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great to
Yep.
hear.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great because most people don't know they have that option.
Yeah, for sure.
To even ask for it, so that's great. All right, so Customs and Border Patrol. These are the agents you meet when you're coming back internationally, back into the United States. So when you're at an airport coming through the customs line, that is considered a port of entry. And the agents that are sitting at that booth are CBP agents, just as if it would be a land port of entry and you were coming by car or something through the southern border. Same agents or Canada. Let's not forget our neighbors to the north. So what can CBP ask? They can ask you about your citizenship, your purpose of your trip, the countries you visited, and what you were bringing back into the United States, because there are laws around that, what you can bring back. They can ask to validate your documentation to verify your identity, usually a passport if you're traveling internationally. They can examine your bags and everything in it. They can physically take an electronic device, so a phone or a laptop, but they cannot force you to unlock your device. And we'll go a little bit more in depth into this in a second. If your device is taken from you, always ask for a receipt. They might not return it to you that same day. They might have to mail it back to you. So what can CBP not do? They cannot ask personal questions without cause about your family, job, politics, or religion. They cannot target you for more screening based solely on your race, ethnicity, or religion. They cannot strip search you without probable cause that you have committed a crime or that you're going to be committing a crime. They cannot hold you for prolonged secondary screening without allowing you to have an attorney present. If you're held for secondary screening, please note what time that starts and what time it ends. If it's too long, it's based on the circumstance, right? So you want to take those notes. They cannot force you to be patted down from someone from a different gender. You can ask for a same gendered officer or agent, and also ask for a private room.
So the difference between TSA and Customs and Border Patrol sometimes can be whether one is law enforcement or one is not. I know TSA doesn't have as many law enforcement officers as maybe Customs or Border Patrol. And so just kind of reading through this, I want to make sure that folks understand it's really important to be able to know how to identify which is which, whether one is a citizen and then also whether one is law enforcement officers. And so you can identify that person by their badge and also, of course, the things around their waist. So just a little extra.
Yeah, I like the extra. Okay, so now we're going to talk about devices and how we assert our rights, right? So throughout this entire time, in every episode, we talk about rights. So those are what is afforded to you by the U.S. Constitution for all persons that are in the United States. But then you have to do the risk analysis, right, of what that means to you. Because if you assert a right, it might cause more delay. And so that's really important to understand. So some tips for traveling right now, especially for coming back into the United States. If you don't need your device, it's hard to imagine not needing your device.
Especially in the country.
But there have been times where we didn't have these and traveled overseas, right? At least I have. I don't know about you, you're a lot younger than me. But if you really don't need it, don't take it. You know, if you can purchase a flip phone or a burner phone or phone when you get to the country that you're going to, that is important because everything lives on these phones, including our browser history, which CBP has the authority to look at. So if you take your devices with you, make sure you encrypt and back up your device data to a cloud-based service. And then before you travel back, erase all sensitive data and login information from your device. Because you've saved it to the cloud, when you come back home or back into the country, you're gonna just need to download all of those things too. Use a strong password and turn off fingerprint or face unlock, because if the agent has your phone and just puts it in front of your face and it unlocks, there's an argument that that's consent.
Sure.
But we don't want it to be that easy. Remember that CBP can review the contents of your device. They can go into this and look around. So copy your data if they believe there is evidence of a crime, past, present, or future, and even conduct a forensic search on your phone. This is all of the things CBP can do when you're coming back into the country without a warrant. They don't need warrants for those types of these things at the border.
And that is in place at the border, not if they take your phone, correct?
Maybe.
So if they, and we'll get into this in the next step, but if they take your phone and maybe you don't get it back the next day, let's say it takes them a week, do they then need a warrant to continue to look?
Not as far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah, this is kind of the new area of law that we're gonna have probably start seeing litigation on, as there's an increased or prolonged detention in some of these actions in court. They can keep your device up to 5 days, and then they can increase those increments by 7 days for advanced forensic searches or extenuating circumstances. So again, ask for a receipt. Sometimes we don't know how long they're going to keep those devices for. Another question we're getting a lot is, so if CBP takes my phone, do I have to unlock the device for them if they ask? So this is where it matters what your immigration status is, right? So if you're a US citizen, you cannot be denied entry into the United States if you do not comply with the request to unlock your phone and provide a password. But this could cause delays in passing through and delays in getting your device back. So again, that's the risk assessment you have to do for yourself. This should also be true for everyone who is a lawful permanent resident, otherwise known as having a green card, and you've maintained your status. So if you have a green card, your status cannot be taken away unless you have a hearing in front of an immigration judge. So CBP does not have the authority to take your status away. Okay, if you are a visa holder or a tourist from another country, you can be denied entry into the country for pretty much any reason. So something to tell your families and friends if they're coming from overseas and visiting here in the United States. A visa, there's a misunderstanding of what a visa actually is, right? A visa is permission to come to the port of entry, but the CBP agent is actually the one who gets to decide if you can come in or out if you're using a visa to get in, right? So
good information.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned just some different accesses for U.S. citizens and some others. What would you say to people who are traveling? Like, what should they consider?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a really uncertain time. Unfortunately, the laws and the rules and the order that we have been used to, right, and have been throughout history, or at least in our lifetime, what we've been used to in terms of kind of the boundaries of where we are with law and order are all different now, right? So we can't really depend on precedent from the past. So what we can say is, honestly, if you're traveling, you need to have a plan. And we have some tips on what you should plan for. The first one is travel with as little data and the fewest devices do you need. Really ask yourself, do you really need this device, and for what reason? Encrypt your devices with strong and unique passwords and shut them down when you're coming back in. We will have more resources on the South Dakota Voices website and start posting more information about international travel soon. Store your sensitive data into secure cloud storage and disable all your apps and delete them and make sure they're uploaded onto your cloud base too. So if you are if you had to make the decision to unlock your phone and there's nothing on it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do with that. But don't keep a copy of your cloud on a laptop, for example. That might be in your carry-on or even in your checked luggage, because TPP does have authority to look through your checked luggage once you're kind of on the other side. If you have a camera, make sure you're uploading those pictures to a cloud and not just on your device. And let CBP officers know if you have privilege information. So this is like confidential information, really applies to lawyers and client information or journalists, and doctors and so on.
Okay, awesome. So let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about the Real ID Act. Is this also known as the SAVE Act? No?
I don't think so.
No,
I think that's different.
All right, so we're talking about the Real ID Act, not the SAVE Act. What is it that we need to know about it?
Yes, so the Real ID Act was passed in 2005. That's why I said no, because I knew that was coming up.
Sure.
Which mandated that all IDs, driver's licenses, needed to have a heightened level of federal security measures on the identification itself. So South Dakota started issuing Real ID compliant IDs in December of 2009. So if you've gotten a driver's license since then, whether it was a renewal or your first time, you should be okay. Starting May 7th, so today's May 1st, happy May Day, by the way. So in a week here, everyone who is traveling on a plane, and if you just use your driver's license to identify yourself at TSA, it has to be a Real ID compliant. Again, if you've had a driver's license in South Dakota in particular since 2009, you should be good to go. And the DMV has instructions on how to get a compliant Real ID driver's license. So if you don't have Real ID, let's say you have a flight on May 8th and this goes into effect May 7th, and you're like, oh man, I haven't renewed my license. I don't know why, if that's even possible. Well, let's just say hypothetically, you can use other forms of ID, a U.S. passport, a U.S. passport card, or a Department of Homeland Security Trusted Traveler card, which is similar to like pre-check.
Oh, sure.
Kind of things.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's end today's discussion with just an update on ICE activity. You took a deep breath. What is there that we need to know around ICE?
Yeah, I typed and deleted, but really there's really no easy way to say this, Julian, so I'm just going to say it. But we at South Dakota Voices for Peace have confirmed that ICE agents have been at the Minnehaha County Administration Building and courthouse, and they have made arrests in the last several weeks. So knowing this, now that we know this and have confirmed it 100%, we are recommending the following for people who need to go to the county administration building. So this is the place where you get your license plates and your tabs renewed. That is the building we're talking about, or the courthouse, which is connected to that building. So this is what we're recommending. Make sure you tell someone else that that's where you're going. And if you can take someone with you just to feel more secure about that, or if you need a witness if you do get detained by ICE at the county building, they're there to keep track of those key points of information. Again, we need to memorize phone numbers. I don't even know my son's phone number. I know my husband's phone number, but not my son. So memorize phone numbers of key people that if you are detained, you need to reach, right? So if you do have a lawyer, memorize that phone number. Obviously, a friend or family member. This is all in preparing for detention, okay? So if for any reason you're worried about being detained or deported, please, 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 please fill out a power of attorney form, which you can find for free on our website. As a friendly reminder, we have 2 different powers of attorney on our website. A power of attorney is a document which you are giving someone else the authority to take care of your children or separately your financial assets if you are detained or deported. We have these documents in English and Spanish in a frequently asked questions kind of page that will help you fill out the form, which you can do on your own. The only thing you need for it to be a legal document is a stamp from a notary public. And so we have free notaries at our office, and we know Caminando Juntos does too, who is a part of our coalition. You can call us at 605-782-9560 at South Dakota Voices for Peace to make an appointment. We can help you walk through the form, and then we can also provide that notary stamp for free. And then we have Caminando Juntos' phone number here on our slide, which is 605-274-3735. So all of this is free. The forms are free on our website. You just have to print them. The notary stamp is free. So if anyone is charging you money to fill out a power of attorney, I would say you don't need to use that service. It's something you can do on your own by printing or calling our offices for assistance. If you want more in-depth information about how to take care of your children and do that power of attorney or your financial assets, in episode 3, can you believe we're on episode 13?
It's crazy.
It is kind of crazy. So episode 3 goes in depth. The whole segment is about power of attorney. So please go back and you can find all of those episodes on the Voices website and YouTube page, as well as the Hub Facebook page and YouTube page.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. So it's important to remember, Julian, just really quick, there are different types of warrants. An administrative warrant is a type of warrant. A judicial warrant is what ICE needs. A valid judicial warrant is what ICE needs to make arrests, unless you're in the act of committing a crime, right?
Sure.
Which is called exigent circumstances. So
Look at you.
don't want to get too lawyerly over here. But so if you're let's say you're at the county building, you see ICE, you definitely don't want to run away because this will now give reason to detain you without needing a warrant, right? Right? Okay, former law enforcement officer. And so if ICE approaches you and you can say, "Are you going to arrest me?"
Okay.
Right?
You can.
You can. And then you can say, "Well, I need to see a warrant."
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
That is our constitutional right.
It is.
I know. I was going to call you to go through this, but we'll just keep it general.
Okay. Yep.
There are always exceptions to the rule.
Right.
But
Particularly search and seizure laws, which is drastically different when you talk about warrants.
so this is my question, though. And we'll get to it in a second. I do have a question for you.
Okay.
It has to be valid judicial warrant. On our website, we have pictures of what a valid judicial warrant is. It must be issued by a court.
Mhm.
So in South Dakota, it should be a state court or federal court in our jurisdiction.
Yep.
It has to be signed by a judge. It has to state your name or the person that's supposed to be arrested. But what about an address? Does it need to be?
No, it doesn't necessarily need an
Okay.
address. Specifically because if you get pulled over in a vehicle, there's no address attached to the vehicle.
Okay.
And you don't know what vehicle a person is driving from day to day.
Okay.
So, yeah, that does not need. However, maybe just a follow-up question, and this is something maybe we can bring to another episode. But you talk about those warrants having to be signed by judges.
Mhm.
Now that we know Minnehaha County is working with ICE,
Mhm.
do we now think that it has to be signed by a county judge, or can it be signed by a magistrate? Like, who can sign those warrants?
Okay, so totally whole episode 14.
All right.
We will talk about how Minnehaha is working with ICE, but just really quickly, a contract between Minnehaha County Sheriff's Department and Homeland Security has been signed. It's called a 287G, but is very limited. It is only for jail staff to be trained. So I would say, based on just that information, a warrant can be signed by any judge.
Sure. Okay.
You know, a state court judge or a federal judge
Gotcha.
to be, and then it has to be executed before the expiration date. There's usually an expiration date, right? So remember, if you ask for a warrant, you have to make sure all of those things are met, and then you have to comply, because then it's valid. If it's not, you can say, well, I can see this is not a valid judicial warrant, so you can't arrest me right now.
Right.
You have a right to say that. What happens next, I guess, is dependent on the situation. But the reason we emphasize that you know your rights and you say those things is because if there is a constitutional violation and you want to go to court, now you have proof of asserting your right.
Yeah. And, you know, it's also important to know in that particular instance, the situation that Tenisa gave, know the difference between a detainment and an arrest in that moment. Because the detainment also means that maybe they can call the judge to get a warrant on the spot or to get an update on the warrant. So those things can happen. They have happened in other cases.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we need to do episode 14.
Yeah.
Okay. So another thing is ICE still needs warrants. Okay, there's no law that has been passed that says the ICE doesn't need warrants. The reason they need warrants is based on our constitutional rights and years and years and years of case law, right?
Yeah.
Which we call precedent. ICE does not need a warrant to come onto public property. That's why they can just kind of be hanging out at the Minnehaha government building. It's a government building. It's open to the public. It's a public space. But let's say, you know, you're a church. We're getting some questions about, well, if we're a church, can ICE just come in, barge in? No, they can come into your public spaces, which was typically going to be your parking lot or the front entrance of your church, but where worshipers are or congregate, maybe in like the basement, you know, where you all eat together or where you're praying together in the sanctuary is arguably private space. But if you would like more individualized training on that, you can call our office or send us an email at Voices for Peace, and we'd be more than happy to help you figure out how to identify public space and private space, because that's what it really hinges on, where ICE needs a warrant. But ICE will need a warrant if they're making an arrest, right?
Yes.
Unless the exceptions, but we're not talking about exceptions right now.
Right.
But if ICE just walks into a church and sees me, and was like, oh, I think she was on that list, right? But we don't have a warrant, I can assert my right to say I need to see a valid warrant before I'm going to turn myself over to you guys.
Form of barrier.
Yeah, it is a protection. And again, these are constitutional rights that we all have if you're in the United States, regardless of immigration status. So yeah, I still needs warrants, and we have information on our website for worship center preparedness. So please feel free to go to our website and download those flyers, have a conversation with the decision makers in your church so everyone knows if ICE shows up, what to do.
And those are available in both English and Spanish.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they are.
So before we close it out, I wanted to backtrack just 1 second here, going back to the power of attorney conversation that we had. Power of attorneys can give access a little bit. The question I think that has come up a couple of times is that can a power of attorney act on behalf of someone even if they are still in the United States?
So the way we wrote our power of attorney is that it's only for if you're detained or deported.
Okay.
If you want it for another reason, you can change that language.
Okay.
But we, you know, there were a lot of questions if one parent is detained, but the other parent's still here, but then there's a power of attorney, what does that all mean? So we really made sure it was only for that limited circumstance. Sure. And the power of attorney is for you. So if I and my spouse, we would recommend each person gets this power of attorney, okay, right? Because if I get detained, then the person I have identified can basically take my place in helping to make those decisions with my spouse. But this, obviously, a biological parent will always have parental rights. Yeah. So.
Okay.
a little too technical.
Awesome. I appreciate that answer. So we will close it out right there. Obviously, you heard we got a lot more information that we're going to cover in episode 14. So make sure you are tuning in again next week, 6 a.m. for English, 6:30 for Spanish. Tanisa, thank you so much for all of the information, your expertise and knowledge that you bring to News for You. Again, News for You is powered by the South Dakota Dream Coalition, a group of organizations that are immigrant-led or immigrant-focused. And we really pride ourselves at News for You to bring accurate and timely information surrounding immigration policy. So continue to watch us on Facebook and YouTube, the Hub South Dakota Voices for Peace, South Dakota Dream Coalition, and directly on News for You. Like, follow, share, do all of the things. We really rely on you to continue doing this. And then, Tanisa, you said there's a slide up with the QR code as well, right?
There sure is. It only took me 14 episodes to remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are all nonprofits, and so the way we, a lot of us are providing our time for free because we believe so strongly that communities need to know this information, but we would love to start paying people for their time, the space that you're providing us, the editing and software management that Daniel's doing behind the scenes here. And so we have this QR code for you guys to give us some donations, whatever, every dollar counts, because we use every dollar to the maximum limit. So please help us, please spread the word. A lot of people are thinking about what can they do. Know that if you donate to us, the impact is so huge, right? What were the numbers? How many people have seen?
Yeah, so far, all of our episodes recorded and live, we've reached over 75,000 folks over the past 13 weeks.
Yeah.
100 days. We can celebrate 100 days with that.
Let's celebrate 100 days with that number.
Yes.
So know that every dollar that you give to News for You is making really big impact and hopefully helping people understand more what their rights are, and hopefully just alleviating some of the fear that we know is so pervasive in our community right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next week.